Day, all day. Stream the stories that have you talking near.
We are just coming out of flood stage in Huntington, West Virginia.
From hundreds of local reporters and meteorologists spanning the
All right. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I am here with Brian Henry, who is the Youth Sports Authority, the chairman of the Youth Sports Authority here in Lawton, Fort Sill, and appreciate you joining us today, Brian, and thanks for taking the time. So today had a few technical difficulties here. I'm going to try to bring up a couple things here with reference to what we're going to talk about today. And so what we are going to talk about is we're talking youth sports. So Lawton Youth Sports, what all that entails, and what we're going to do. Let me pull up. Let me see if this comes up. Yeah. So we'll do an open and intro today, talking about the Lawton Youth Sports Authority, what they do, and what the key things they're working on. Specifically, the youth sports complex is the big ticket item. We're going to talk timeline on that. We're also going to talk funding streams and kind of where it looks like with funding right now, because there's several things involving funding. There's grants working through right now. Capital Improvement Plan also is providing some funding for that. So we'll kind of get into the details of that, and then we'll do looking ahead and closing the timeline that we can expect for further construction on that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over for a second and just do a quick intro to Mr. Henry. Brian, again, thanks for being with us today. So here you go. Hey, Brian. So first up, can you tell our viewers, what is the Lawton Youth Sports Authority, and what's the primary mission, and what have you been working on, like building up to at least specifically the youth sports complex?
Sure, Dan. And first of all, thanks for having me out to kind of share all of the news that we've been working on for the better part of 6 years, probably now. Definitely 6 years. So the Lawton Youth Sports Trust Authority is a government entity related to the city of Lawton, is probably the best way to call it. Similar to the Airport Authority, to the Lawton Economic Development Authority, and places like that. We're made up of 7 community volunteers and 2 city council that sit on our trust authority. So we were tasked with taking over the oversight of the youth sports program for the city of Lawton. Parks and Rec at the time, back in 22, is when all this started legally from the authority's formation. They were inundated with multiple tasks, Parks and Rec, mowing, and things of that nature. So as part of this idea of building an indoor sports complex, we were asked to take the ball and run with the whole programming side of it. Yeah. Which we officially did in August of 2022.
Sure. Okay.
So what we did leading up to that was we released a request for proposal for entities to manage the program. So I think one thing that's important for people to know is we hired Eastern Sports Management after going through that process. They are a national firm.
And I remember when that happened a while back. It's kind of a big deal, too.
It was a big deal. We had local groups. We had 2 national groups submit requests for proposals. The thing about Eastern is they fit every single category. They work with municipalities and other states. They've been doing this for 100 years, not really, but it seems like it. They manage their own facilities, and they manage facilities that municipalities have built. So they were an ideal fit. They get no profit from programs. That's a piece that I answer quite a bit. They get a management fee to run the programs. But when we make money, and right now we're not making money, right? Sure. The city is supporting the programs. They won't take profit from that. All of that profit that we will generate will stay with Lawton and the Lawton Youth Sports Trust Authority. I think it's important for people to know that.
No, that's good. That actually is good to know. I think sometimes with stuff like that, it is especially when you're outsourcing and management. It's like, is there an overhead? How much is going from profit to that company? So that actually, I honestly didn't know that.
Yeah, the benefit with them, right? They manage 10 of these facilities. You get that power of scale, right? So their marketing department, their HR department, their accounting department manages all 10 of those. We didn't have to hire people for those specific jobs ourselves. So huge benefit.
Sure. So, so the next thing I think we'll talk about is obviously the big thing, and it's been talked about for a long time, is the sports complex.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gone through several iterations.
Yeah.
I mean, the frustration from the community. I think it's been talked about for a long time. There have been a number of different locations proposed. I know for a period of time it was proposed to be at Elmer Thomas Park. On one particular version of a plan, right? Obviously, not anymore. The aquatic center is now being built there, and you run into basically a space issue there because I know the community was concerned specifically with Elmer Thomas Park and still maintaining the park there as well and not just inundating it with facilities.
Yeah, Dan, you're right. The first idea was to put the facility in the park. And part of that, you and I were talking earlier, have I seen inspirations of these? That's how all this started.
Yeah.
My girls played travel basketball. So for the better part of 12 or 15 years, I traveled around this part of the country.
Sure.
Seeing these kind of facilities and like, why can't we have one of these in Lawton?
Yeah.
So that's how the idea was born. And in those communities, not every one of them, but several of them had these facilities inside parks. Mm-hmm. Albeit a little bit bigger park than Elmer Thomas. That's why the initial thought was, let's put it in the park next to Kids Zone, next to other things that go on, and get that synergy. I'm a firm believer in all things happen for a reason. At that time, we were about an 85,000 square foot building. And in the end, when we got to all of the studies, it was too small to attract regional competitions. It was probably too small for the way the program has grown now. Mm-hmm. So I look back at it now and go, I'm glad it didn't go in Elmer Thomas Park because we'd be looking at expansion already.
Okay.
So some of the delays have been trying to get it in different sites. We tried the KCA land across the street from Elmer Thomas Park. Mm-hmm. That didn't work out. Then we really started to try and focus on where do we have sports assets right now. Grandview is just south of the Eisenhower High School and Middle School complex there. Used to play youth sports in that area there. The high school plays softball up on that hill. So we tried to get an agreement worked out with the Office of Land Commission, a.k.a. the State School Land Commission. And really that process got us thinking we need to buy land because the rent that we were going to pay would have paid for the land in 10 or 15 years. So it was just not cost effective. So then we started looking, why is it where it's at now? We were trying to find a big enough contiguous parcel of land that could fit what we see now and what we see in the future to being able to be built.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things that we'll kind of peel back the onion a little bit on that, so to speak. So you mentioned a few things. So you mentioned kind of the reason why, and I do want to. We'll hit on that in a minute. I think with reference to just the long-term impact for the youth sports facility, both for our youth. In future children to utilize and the youth to utilize, and also looking at really the economic impact that you mentioned. Yeah. I mean, you talked about the ability to bring in different tournaments, different outside of specifically even Lawton Fort Sill, regional tournament, statewide tournament, stuff like that. So we'll hold that thought for a minute. I do want to talk about we do have some graphics for this. I do want to talk about like how did they end up deciding on? How did you end up deciding on the location? On the east side. So I'm going to pull up some graphics here too of that, and then we can kind of talk through that.
There are really, and one other note is, soccer has always been separate from the city, quote unquote, sports programs. The soccer club has always run soccer. The city, before we took over, ran all other sports. We'll just put it that way, Dan.
Yeah.
So what we started looking at is, where are the current assets? There were really three. Grandview, which is south of Eisenhower High School, middle school. 17th and G for all those folks that played ball here when they grew up, like me, down there just east of Sheridan Road, north of Lee Boulevard. Which, by the way, is county land that is leased by the city. And then the East Side Park. which has the 4 ball fields up on the hill, as we call it. Right?
Yeah.
So we started looking in those areas. I just mentioned why we started with Grandview and then moved off of that. 17th and G, there's no expansion capabilities there. It was all leased land, not big enough, to be honest with you. So we really started looking for how can we find larger parcels of land. East side, the city has East Side Park, which is the entry. Yeah. There's a park there. A future splash pad is planned at the park, and then the 4 fields. Initially, I thought that the land surrounding it was School Land Commission. It's actually Lawton Public Schools land.
Yeah. So here, I'm pulling up some photos right now, just for those that are down. So this is current East Side Park.
Yeah, that's
correct?
the view. That's the view coming into the park. You
Okay.
can see the lights up on top of the hill that I was referring to as why we call it the hill.
Yeah.
So that's coming into the park there. And then there should be another shot that will show, that's the actual park. And then this is a view looking back southwest, which is where we envision the building to be built right now.
Okay.
We wanted it closer to the road so that it's visible for folks that are driving by, right? So what we've accomplished, and you can see that in this graphic, there are multiple pieces of parcels of land here.
Yeah, can you, and that's what I kind of wanted to, because this has been a little bit confusing on how this has all been pieced together.
Yeah.
And this kind of gets into, so we're talking about the, right now let's talk location, and let's talk about how the land got pieced together and what honestly the cost is. Because I think that's a question for some people, like why it was on the east side, who was the land purchased from, who does it belong to still?
So go back to, things happen for a reason. We were actually looking at buying the land just south of MacArthur.
Okay.
It would have been discounted to $1 million. It was $1.5 million value. There were some issues with the land transfer in the past. Long story. Anyway, we couldn't get those cleared up. So we moved across the street because, again, those 4 fields there. So what we've worked out now is the city owns 40 acres. There's 40 acres behind to the north and to the south of those fields that Lawton Public Schools owns.
Okay.
And then on the far west side, so it butts up to that neighborhood and north of those apartment complexes.
Yeah.
That's the only land we actually purchased. We purchased that for fair market value of $300,000.
Okay.
Right? We bought that from the Frank Richards Living Trust. So in effect, what we've got is 120 acres, quote, at our disposal for a total sum cost of $300,000.
Okay, and that's obviously incorporating like the city of Lawton owned already like the East Side Park complex that's already there.
That's
correct?
Right. So using current assets.
Yes.
And then the lease agreement that we were able to negotiate with the Lawton Public Schools, it does have a lease price.
Okay.
So a monthly payment. It's an annual payment.
Okay.
But that payment is forgiven if we allow the schools availability of the facilities for 600 hours every school year.
So essentially what you're saying is that Lawton Public Schools owns that portion of the land.
40 acres.
40 acres. There's 40 acres of the larger swath. Mm-hmm. It would cost money, however, if there's an agreement with Lawton Public Schools on that lease.
It's about $48,000 a year.
Okay. However, if I just want to clarify this because this is important, right? Mm-hmm. Because everything costs money and it adds up quickly. You're saying that it will not, as long as the city of Lawton and the Lawton Youth Sports Authority allows the school district to use for, you said 600
hours a year.
600 hours a year, then that cost is waived.
It's waived. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So picture that, and Superintendent Heim and I have had these conversations, just throwing ideas out. He asked about when the building gets built, what if we hosted a high school wrestling tournament? And I know we'll get into what's inside the building, but we would be able to have a wrestling tournament under one roof that Lawton has never had before.
Sure.
So that would be a qualified use, right? So if we have a Friday and Saturday wrestling tournament and there's 16 hours of wrestling, that fits in under that 600 hours. If they want to run scrimmages over there and bring in multiple teams, if for some reason a gym's not available and they want to practice during their first hour, sixth hour, or whatever
Sure.
hour they practice. Those are all those qualifying hours that waive that lease payment.
Okay. So we talked about, we kind of open. I'm just going to kind of recap a couple things, just as because again, kind of an informal conversation right now. And if anybody's just hopped in, we're talking with Brian Henry, who is the chairman of the Youth Sports Authority here in Lawton. And the specific thing that we're talking about right now, and it's been on the docket for a long time, is a youth sports complex. We just talked about the location, has been discussed in multiple, over the last few years, has been discussed in multiple locations, including Elmer Thomas Park. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. The city is now finally, with your help and the authorities' help, is purchased and acquired land on the east side, surrounding East Side Park. We just talked about some of the stipulations with that, how some of it was purchased, fair market value, others is city property already, and then a portion of it, that 40 acres, belongs to the school, and an agreement that basically says that, I think you said the school would lease it to the city of Lawton or the Youth Sports Authority for $48,000 a year. However, that could be waived if the school district can use it for 640 hours per year. So did I get it right?
Yeah, and that's a key point too. There was some confusion early on when this came out that it was MacArthur could use it. While they can,
district-wide.
It's for the whole district.
District-wide?
It's not specifically for MacArthur.
Okay.
Just happens to be next door.
Yeah. No, I mean, east side there.
Yeah.
Just so you're tracking, my son went to Lawton High. So
that's okay.
Wolverines. Okay. So talking that, you talked about hosting, you gave an example of Lawton Public Schools like hosting a wrestling tournament in this facility. So let's go ahead and I'm going to jump to, because we talked to the land. Let's go ahead and talk design.
Yeah.
Right. Can we talk design?
Absolutely.
I think we got some graphics on that. I'm going to try to pull it up. So let's talk outside first. Can we talk outside, the outside plan first, and then we'll kind of go inside first. So I'm going to pull this up here. So this is basically the outside. So what I see on this graphic here, sorry, if I was muted there, I apologize. My microphone was off for a second. If I am viewing this right, obviously in the east side of that, you see the baseball diamond. So that's the existing.
Those are the existing fields.
Existing fields there. Can you kind of explain what else is on
so
here?
I'll just call it from the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
Right, is the indoor sports complex. And we'll look at the details inside of that.
We do have diagrams for that.
So the gray around that's just parking. And then what you see is the current road that goes up to those fields and the existing parking that is already at East Side. And then all of those squares and rectangles that you see in the green there. So what I'm trying to keep referring to those to, the concept of those is multi-purpose turfed fields.
Okay.
So we have seen this in quite a few communities where they turf the field and pre-paint all of the various sports lines, if you will.
Okay.
So on those fields, you can kind of see it. It's big enough for a soccer field, which means it's big enough for a football field because it's smaller than a soccer field.
Okay.
And then in the corners of each of those we refer to those just as diamonds, whether that be softball or baseball. So they're interchangeable where we can move bases, pitching mounds for the required distances literally in minutes. It'll have movable fences so that you can bring the fences in and out for the various age groups.
Okay.
So on one field, you could have 2 softball games going. On another one, you could have a football game going. On another one, you could have 2 baseball games going. Multi-purpose turf fields.
So multi-purpose turf field, you said basically, obviously soccer, football, baseball,
softball, flag football.
Okay.
If we have field hockey enthusiasts out there that we can get a league going, we can do it.
Yeah.
Anything you basically can put on turf, you'd be able to play on it. Because the soccer field's about the biggest field there is for the outdoor fields.
Okay.
Everything will fit inside of that.
Okay. All right. So anything else you want to talk inform the community specifically for the outside plan on this?
Yeah,
specifically.
and when we talk about way forward and all that, I'll kind of lay that
Okay,
out. Dan.
sure. Okay, let's go ahead and talk. Let's talk indoor plan here for a minute. So, I mean, there's a lot going on here too.
Yeah. So let's just take them bit by bit.
Sure.
And we'll take the top portion of that. So the
Sure.
kind of beige there.
Okay.
What those are 8 basketball courts, and they're spaced far enough where we can then turn horizontally, and you can get 2 volleyball courts on each basketball court.
Okay.
So 8 basketball, 16 volleyball, which also means you can put futsal, which we play right now. It's one of
Sure.
the sports we introduced. You can play futsal in there. You can play pickleball with movable nets.
Okay.
Just by taping the outline of the court, all on that top portion. So you can play multiple sports. They won't be the NBA version maple floors, right? Because we want them to be able to take on different activities without costing $4 million to install it.
Yeah.
All of that's up top. That middle portion, we'll call that the boring part. That's the admin. That's
Restrooms.
The restrooms, the
Okay.
kitchen.
Cut
not
locker
boring
room.
part. Concession food at a sports complex, not boring, right?
Yeah.
But all of that goes in the middle port.
Okay.
On the bottom, the 2 green, those are indoor turfed fields.
Okay.
So they are not
Full size, like soccer?
They're not full-size soccer, right?
Okay. Okay.
What we've done is try and keep it to about 140,000 square foot building
Okay.
here. So they're not regulation indoor soccer, but we're not going to host FIFA in there, but we would be able to host indoor soccer there.
Okay.
I've seen actually in some of ESM's facilities where they have adult indoor softball played on these fields.
Okay.
And the reason you can do that is the fields are covered with nets, right? So no ball will escape either of those fields.
Okay.
And then on the right-hand side is a fitness center.
Okay.
The gray area there.
Now, because I saw on the plans with the fitness center. I mean, what's are we talking like community fitness center? Is there something that I mean, obviously, there'd probably a fee associated with it.
So there'd be a membership typically
Okay.
on the fee. What we're looking to do is be self-sufficient. Right?
Okay.
So the city now supports the programs. We think, and we're working on the strategic plan right now, almost have that done. We think within 5 years we can be self-sufficient.
Okay.
Which is a big deal.
I mean, so you're saying you would not require city funding?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the idea behind that is, one, people can come in and use it as a fitness center. And then what we want to do is from that fitness center is step up the level of the sports membership, if you will.
Okay.
So what we envision in there are maybe even teams working out in the off season or in between practices in those kind of facilities. There's group areas that they can work in. There's various physical fitness equipment in there.
So I mean, can we talk? So just for a minute, like as we kind of we'll veer off just for a second.
Sure.
So we play Lawton in the current sports right now. So obviously this will be incorporated into this. And I mean, I know the Youth Sports Authority for Lawton has looked at a couple like peer cities. Who have you looked at specifically for programs that actually turn a profit, or not turn, at least self-sufficient to where that
that most of them don't turn a profit.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've done extensive research. Most of the communities still provide some sort of financial support for the programming. Almost all of them have outsourced, quote unquote, outsourced it from the city to some other entity, whether it be a nonprofit or a group like ours. There are some that do some of the sports. Probably the one that people will know more about is Norman.
Okay.
Because they've done a lot of the same things. They're just a few years ahead of us on the time frame. They have a capital improvements program that went to improving several of their programs. The Young Family Athletic Center is an example of that. It's in North Norman. The Young is Trey Young. The reason it's named after him is he donated $4 million to the project.
Okay.
So it's very similar to ours, except for turf fields, they have indoor swimming pools.
Yeah.
And then the other thing Norman did is revamp their entire Reeves Park, which is all of their softball and baseball fields.
Okay.
So very similar to what we're doing or hope to be doing.
Sure. So that moves on to, so let's talk, let's go ahead and talk. I'm going to pull up just a graphic of the building here. Let's just talk about just some of the timelines as we kind of scroll through a couple of these photos. Or at least art. I'm sorry, they're not photos. They're artist renderings.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and talk. Can we talk specific like timeline where we're at right now in the process? Because we know the land has already been secured.
Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through where we're at on the city council kind of approval process, and then can we talk some of the funding too right now?
So what you're looking at now is some renderings of what we believe the outdoor can look like, or the outside can look like. The yellow is probably not staying; it was just a placeholder there. Right?
Oh, okay.
So we now have a name. City Council has approved $1.25 million for us to get through the design phase.
Okay.
We just actually Monday the authority approved the design development phase. So that is phase 2.
Okay.
And that moves us into phase 3, which is construction drawings. The timeline for the construction drawings is to be done by the end of August. Once those get to about 75%, we could release an RFP or an RFQ for construction manager. A little bit down the line there, but that's one of the next steps. So we are funded through the construction drawings, which then allows us to go get, quote, a hard price for what this would cost.
So what, I mean, honestly, what is the cost? What, I mean, have you?
Yeah, the estimates right now, Dan, for the whole thing
is
in that $60 to $65 million range.
And where's the fund? I mean, where's the funding coming from?
Yeah, so our first grant came from the McMahon Foundation. They awarded us $3 million. That's to be paid out over 6 years. And then at this point, we have a grant request in for TSET, the Tobacco Settlement Estate Trust. They have a specific grant that is actually asking for larger requests. It was a minimum of $3 million. We have submitted a $12 million request to support construction here. But the rest of the funding, similar to Norman, we would look for it to come from the CIP program. And you'll remember in that CIP, there was a dedicated $0.25 to Parks and Rec, as well as roads, but there was a $0.25 to Parks and Rec.
Sure.
We fall under that category.
Okay. In that specifically, that funding stream, if my memory serves me correctly, was basically a permanent. At least allocation.
It is a non-expiring.
I'm sorry, non-expiring allocation.
So it can be voted back off, but it would have to be voted back off, not renewed.
But in reality, the goal would be, I mean, obviously, you said is self-sustaining if possible.
Yeah, self-sustaining from an operation standpoint.
Okay.
From a construction
Facilities
standpoint.
maintenance, construction. Okay.
No.
Understood. Yeah.
You know, there's a breaking point between how do we keep the price right for full participation of all levels of income and all.
Understood. Yeah. So, well, I think you answered my questions, obviously, with reference to kind of funding. Honestly, when can the city, like community members, expect breaking ground on the facility?
The way I can answer that is I can tell you from a design standpoint when we can be ready, and that's November. And when people go, well, wait a minute, what's the difference between design and then starting?
Sure.
Because then the funding has to be obtained, right? So similar to what the city is doing now to fund some of the other CIP programs, one option is to go out and get a loan using the revenue coming from that CIP to pay it back.
Okay.
So that's an option we're exploring with the city right now, and who've been fantastic to work with on this project, by the way. Them and Lawton Public Schools, this thing wouldn't be going anywhere. So we could start breaking ground in November, but that would you would have to have the funding in line. We can't release we can't award an RFP without funding in place. So that is the variable there that I can't answer.
Okay.
We would love to start in November, which would put us opening the indoor facility in February of 2027.
Okay. So we're running a little short on time, but that's okay. This is a good discussion. I think it's for those that have tuned in. I think it's definitely enlightening on a few things that are going on, because there is a lot going on specifically with it. Can you talk? So we talked about the land purchase. We've discussed specific to the building and what could go on there. Let's pull it back or go back up kind of towards the top when you mentioned kind of economic impact and what the vision is for this facility outside of just regular community use.
And I'll preface that, Dan. Early on, somebody who wasn't a believer in the project said, "What are you going to do, build it and hope people come?" And part of my answer was, yes, but more so, we need to build it because they're already here, right? So we're using Lawton Public Schools facilities, who have been gracious enough to allow us to do that. We're about at capacity. We had 96 teams in our winter league this last year. We're running out of space because the schools still use them, right? So, when we start looking at economic impact, it's more than just what's coming from outside. It's
Sure.
our kids here.
Internal.
We've got all these high-tech jobs queued up and coming in. Well, we want those folks to live in Lawton and have things for their families to do. This is one of those. STEM programs are important. Another group's handling that. This is our focus, right? Our initial look at an economic impact just with the building was no less than $150 million over 20 years. Mm-hmm. Now, there's formulas for that, right? How many tournaments do you run? How many teams? Average number of people coming per player. It will be at least that number because of hotel rooms and then, restaurants, gas purchases,
Sure.
tax revenue increases. The economic impact can be huge.
Yeah. No. I mean, and that's good. And I think that, one of the things that, my wife and I, I'm a career Army guy. We chose to retire here in Lawton, Fort Sill. We love the community. Love to see things like this come in and folks, advocating for, because I think one of the biggest things, the complaints specific to Lawton is that, well, there's nothing to do here, or hey, we need better facilities. And I think right now, obviously the aquatic center is close, right? It keeps getting pushed back. I got my fingers crossed that it will open. I think they're saying right middle of August right now. I think that the next thing is, specific to the youth sports complex, I think is one of those things where it's been on the docket for so long. That people are just like, okay, is it going to happen or not? I mean, I think we're seeing forward progress. That was part of the reason why I asked you to come in here and discuss this, because we just happened to run into each other, and I kind of picked your brain a little bit on it, because it is, I think, value added for the community. We'll look to wrap up here. A couple more questions. So you talked about. You talked a little bit about like accessibility with reference to, regardless of income, open the entire community. Can you talk at all specific to like how the Youth Sports Authority will ensure that we're serving all parts of the community?
Yeah. A little background to that too. In addition to looking at facilities, mm-hmm. I've done some studying on what other peer cities are charging for their seasons. Right now we're about $55 per participant, which is on average per sport about $40 below our peer cities. Some are higher, $120, $140 to play football. The minimum I've seen is $85 to play any sport, right? So that's part of that becoming self-sustaining so that the city doesn't have to fund it. Now, if city council says, hey, we want it to be lower, it'll come with having to provide funding from a city operations standpoint. But we have a scholarship program as well, and we already have funds in that program. You asked me in that conversation where we ran into each other, how can people help? We do have a specific program set up with a 501c3 that can take donations that provide scholarships to folks that maybe can't afford the entry fee.
Okay.
So the accessibility for potential low income is there. I will tell you, Dan, we've had 3 applications for that so far. That's all. So we're at a good price point where people who want to play seem to have the wherewithal to play.
Yeah, no, I did not know about the nonprofit. And again, maybe it's just something that needs to be talked about a little bit more and circulated.
So if people go to playlawton.com, right, that is our site, right?
Yeah.
When they go to register, there's a banner down there that talks about the scholarship piece. You got to fill out a little application.
Sure.
It gets reviewed, and the 3 have been approved.
Sure. Okay. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I think I told you 30 minutes. It's been a little bit longer than that.
You get me talking about this, and I can go.
Yeah. So no, I appreciate you. I definitely appreciate you coming in. Is there anything else that you wanted to specifically talk about with whether it's talking Play Lawton, current state right now, Youth Sports Authority, or the sports complex that we didn't talk about today?
The thing that I think I want people to see is, and this is not a reflection of how things were done before, when you can focus on one thing, youth sports, you can really put a lot of energy into it. Since 2022, participation has grown 56%. We've introduced new sports. We've introduced the same sport multiple times a year so that we've got kids playing sports year-round now. Last fiscal year, we eclipsed the high number of 3,100 participants.
Okay.
This year, we clipped that again at 3,400 participants. Youth sports is growing, and I think it's that energy that we're getting off of this thing is becoming a reality.
Sure. All right. Well, Brian, I appreciate you coming in and speaking with me on this and taking a little bit more time. It's probably been about 45 minutes instead of 30. Real quick, last little thing. If folks want to find more information, can you just throw out the web address and everything?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Playlawton.com.
Okay.
That's where all of the programming stuff is at. If they want to see more about this program, the sports complex, the city has a banner on their homepage.
They do.
The
I've
Propel
actually
2040.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So all of the drawings and all of that will be there.
And then when's the next touch point between the Youth Sports Authority and the Lawton City Council?
Yeah,
for a next
so the next
request?
big thing, right? There's a couple of things that they'll approve from an administrative standpoint between now and then, but we hope to be on their agenda that first meeting in August, where we'll be able to show them 3D renderings of the interior of the building, give them an idea of the whole scope of the site. And that will be the next big item. So about 4 weeks away, hopefully.
Yeah. Real quick, so I'll just I'm going to pop this up. So because these graphics were approved, right?
Yes.
So this was approved by council. So this is specifically going to be the sports park graphic.
Yeah. So what they approved is renaming that whole area Lawton Fort Sill Sports Park.
Okay.
Now, if there's some tie to East Side Park, it can still be the playground. But we wanted to get away from that distinction of east, west, north, south, right?
Okay.
And then we've got a similar logo and a new name, not a new name, but a name for the building. It's the Play Lawton Sportsplex, so that's tying in the traction we've gained with Play Lawton as an entity. Okay. And then Sports Complex, shortened to Plex. We think people will call it the Plex. And you see there we're giving credit to the McMahon Foundation grant.
I'm glad I remembered. I had those up on the playlist, and I meant to pull those up earlier when we were talking about the design phase of stuff there. But again, Brian, I appreciate you coming in. I think we're going to have him in again maybe a little bit later as you move a little bit further in the process and some additional stuff gets approved. Heck, maybe we can even meet you maybe out there sometime when they break ground, and we can talk to you out there. So again, thanks a lot, and stay tuned to KSWO as we continue to kind of track this and other things in the community. Appreciate it. Thanks
Dan.
But it's still the third most common type of impersonation scam.